Hey guys, I thought we would do just a little garden tour today. It is April. There isn't a ton growing in the garden, but there are some fun things in there that we're going to take a look at. We'll talk a little bit about my projects and how things are evolving in this no-till garden. And I'm not doing this just honestly for you guys. My 96-year-old grandfather watches these videos and he is my inspiration behind gardening. He's the reason why I garden today. So I like to share it with him. He's back home in Canada and he can't come down to see my garden. He would be, I'm sure, super proud. So I'd like to share it with him so you guys get to share it with him as well. So we're going to walk through the garden. Let's take a little tour. As we go through the garden, you're going to see a bit of a mix. We still have some winter veggies that are just on their last days and are ready to be harvested, as well as we've got some summer veggies that have already been planted that are on their way. So you're going to see a bit of that turnover mix where you have a bit of both going on. So it starts here with some winter cabbages we planted in around December. These guys are good to go and ready to be eaten. We have some onions along the way. They are starting to hit their point where they're going to be ready to go soon. You can see that their fronds are starting to die a bit and they're starting to bulb as well. We did most of our onions in cattle feed containers this year. I really like them this way because it's easy to control the moisture, because onions can grow at a time sometimes where we get a ton of water, a ton of moisture, like we go through kind of like a flooding season. So this is a fast draining soil and it helps prevent the bulbs from rotting. Now, we did not actually have a heavy rains type of season, so in the ground on a small box has worked just fine as well this year. Let's go over to an area where I've put in a couple of native plants boxes. The goal with these boxes are to plant native flowers and or really good nectar flowers that are good for the pollinators. I've created it so that the pollinators have a place within the garden to go that has the right food sources and nectar sources for pollinators. Now, for those of you that haven't followed us for a long time, you would not necessarily know that this was actually all grass when we first moved in. Over the years, we have spent quite a bit of time trying to create a massive no-till garden, and this is what it is today. We had quite a few failed attempts along the way. The first couple of years, we were just inundated with grass, and finally now we have it to a point where weeds are easily manageable. No-till does not mean no weeds. If anybody tells you that, that's just not true at all. You definitely get weeds, but because of the quality of your soil and your ground, they're super easy to pick. All right, you can see here, I've got some weeds in here. These are easy to pick. Over the years, we tried different things to put down in between the rows. I've tried having nothing at all. I have tried putting down straw. Straw was a massive mistake. Don't go there. And then bark mulch. Bark mulch, to me, by far, is the absolute best. I know a lot of people will say, well, it takes up nitrogen from your soil, but I'm constantly building up the soil. And there's never any nitrogen in Mississippi soil anyway, so you're constantly having to add it. So I'm sold on bark mulch. It just makes weed management so much easier. So within the native plant box, we have some gar going on. I think that's a non-native oxtail. It has pretty pink flowers on it. It was growing wild in the yard and I picked it up and I thought, oh, I think it's native, and it is. I don't actually think it is. I have no clue what's growing back there. It's just popped up. It looks like it's been planted. I actually don't also know what this one is. So I'll have to wait till those guys flower to figure them out. That is mountain mint, which is beneficial to bees. I did a video all about that. We have some swamp sunflowers. They came from another area in the yard and they easily multiply and they're so beneficial, especially beautiful in the fall. And that's, I think, pretty much it. So in this box is echinacea and as well as some volunteer plants. And quite frankly, weeds are just misunderstood plants. Although many of you might feel like weeds are an annoyance, but weeds, if they're native anyways, have a purpose, and we just might not understand what that purpose is. Now, an invasive one, and you can't be a native plant and be invasive, although many people I'm sure would love to argue that. They could be aggressive, but if they're in their natural state, it's not actually invasive. A non-native plant though, so anything like or in the USA. So if a Chinese tallow tree is a very common invasive one, wisteria is invasive, beautiful, but invasive. So those, because they don't normally exist and belong in this area, can be considered invasive. I have some late leftover lettuce. It's starting to get a little hot. We'll see how this makes. We might get, a salad or two out of them. Tomatoes are planted. We actually have a great start to the tomatoes. These guys have been through a freeze. We also talk about that in another video. They survived just beautifully. We did have them covered with some plastic, but other than that, they've done great. So we're off to a good start with tomatoes. And I do all sorts of tomatoes. I do an absolute cluster mix of tomatoes. There isn't one particular variety, although this year I am trying the variety Jolene. Well, let's see how that tomato does. And I tend to grow a lot of cherry tomatoes. One of my favorite things to sell at the farmer's market is cherry tomatoes, and I like to have a big bright basket of mixed cherry tomatoes. I have planted a variety of tomatoes in the cattle containers, as well as one large cloth container. And they're actually doing better in the cattle containers than they are in the ground, which is interesting. But I think over time, the ones in the ground will do better. You'll see areas throughout our garden that look like this. This is our cover crop that still needs to be killed back. We will put black plastic over top of this, and in a couple of days, it'll be died down. In the blue garden, we are going to have mostly the melons within here. I do have in the blue cattle containers, I do have tomatoes. There's a little bit of dill that's volunteered. I didn't actually plant that, and it's volunteered in a couple of containers. And I do have a couple of purple potatoes that are still coming to life. And cucumbers usually go in this garden here. We may rotate, but I think this year probably be the same as last year. We'll have cucumbers here, and we'll have squash over there. I'm not sure what I'm planting in this garden bed yet. It might be green beans, but we'll have to wait and see. So this section is under review. I need to do something different in here. It hasn't worked for me in the last year. It's worked for me in one way. This is an absolutely beautiful spring flower section. The coreopsis just absolutely takes over. The containers have done mediocre, and I find that I spend a lot of time fighting back some weeds in here. Like, they come through because we've got a fence in here and I can't get weeded around the fence super easy. So this area, I need to rethink what I want to do here. I know I want to remove that fence. That's on our list of things to do. We also want to add a she shed. I want to be able to get my winter stuff out of a shed that is nearby, and I'm trying to figure out kind of where it should be positioned. You want it positioned in a spot that it's easily accessible, but also we've got different issues like water running and where you're going to plant future things. There's so many things to think of that I haven't been able to find the right spot for this she shed. We have a giant banana tree that grows up in here. It's quite pretty, but honestly, if you're thinking about planting a banana tree, I'd think twice, because they're a big mess. They're a great hiding spot for snakes, which I'm not against snakes by any means, but I try to keep areas where my feet and hands are. I try to keep them as neat as possible just to prevent interactions with them. But these guys grow big and they keep growing and they take over, and then the leaves die off and you've got to clean up all those plants within the leaves. So I don't know that I'd recommend a banana plant unless you have a really large space and you can put them off somewhere where you don't have to be near them. I do have eggplants planted. All the greenery on the corners of the pots, that's all coreopsis in there with the occasional weed or two, but that is eggplants in these cattle containers. This is, I do believe, some garlic. I haven't seen them since the fall, so I think those are garlic. And more eggplant. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with this space. I love the containers. However, they're so far away from the house that they don't get watered or cared for quite as well as any plants that are near the house. I could build a water system or have it put out this way, but at this time I'm not sure if that's what I'm going to do. When the high tunnel is finished at the back, it's going to change things quite a bit. It's going to become a new area where there's new landscaping done around it, which might make this area kind of used differently. So I'm going to wait and see how it evolves. You guys, if you have any ideas on how you would, reshape this space, by all means, put them in the comments down below. I'm always interested in what other people think. I've pulled out the pineapples. That pineapple back there gave us our very first pineapple, and this guy, I'm hoping actually maybe this season we might see a pineapple out of this one. And this is Pineapple Row. So over this weekend I will be spending it planting in all of the rows that you're seeing that are kind of empty. I'll be working on killing off the cover crop, which is a legume. So we will be killing those off and getting ready to plant our, squash, cucumbers, those type of things. And this is another area of our garden that is under redevelopment. So this was the red garden. This has been under development a couple of times. This used to be a greenhouse. At one time it collapsed, the plastic fell through. We just built it terribly wrong, and we got a new one and built it on a different spot. Then it became the herb garden. And now my other learnings with the herb garden is that I don't love these short boxes. They are too small and the weeds get in too easily. I would definitely, if you are building planter boxes, at least go 2 boards high. The smaller boards, they don't seem to work as well. We have strawberry plants in here, and strawberries end up getting covered with weeds. I had to fight them back and basically had to dig out all of the strawberries and separate the weeds from them and start from scratch. So now I'm actually questioning, I don't know what I want to do with the herb garden. I've moved my herbs. I'll show you that in just a second, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. We're going to change the space, I think, over time. And in behind it, we're actually in the process. You can see us digging up, trying to find our water lines and that, but in the process, we're actually going to be building an outdoor kitchen. Now I'm going to show you probably my 2 most favorite places in the entire garden. This is Culinary Row. So in Culinary Row, we've got edibles down here, and most of them are herbs, but there's a couple of items that aren't necessarily fall into the category of herbs as well, but they're basically edible for the most part here. So we've got rosemary, some onions in the back here. This is goji berries. We have sage, oregano, and the oregano, we're just starting to build that one. We just planted some seed and taken from another area in the garden. We've got chives, and look, we've got visitors with the chives. Hello, buddy. We've got garlic chives down below. This is bay leaf laurel. Bay leaf laurel can't stay outside. I've had to take it in. I did do a trial this year and put one outside. It did not make it. More rosemary, parsley. We've got different mints. I do have one little tomato plant stuck in there. Tarragon that I've just planted. We have an eggplant hidden in here, another basil or bay leaf, more mint. I've got a bunch of dill planted in here. This is walking onion, and we have another visitor. Some basil. This basil's been amazing for me. I didn't think basil came back, but this one did. I have no idea what variety it is. I feel like it might be that tall, I can't remember what it's called, but there is a variety that's tall, but I didn't expect it to grow back. It literally has, I've taken all the leaves off of it and then it gave me more leaves, which is, I didn't think was normal for basil. So originally when I started adding these cattle containers to the yard, I had one row down this side. They grew so well and were so much better managed because they're close to the hose. It just made them really successful that I've decided this year I'm adding 2 containers. So these guys in the back are new, and I'm going to keep adding them all the way down to expand my culinary garden. The culinary garden is great because you literally walk out your door and then walk over to the garden and grab what you need. Plus it just looks pretty. I really enjoy the culinary garden, and I don't know, I like having sections, I don't know, it gives it some authority. I don't know what it is, but having a culinary garden brings me joy. So we do have an on standby section. These guys are on standby to be added to other places in the yard, but they spend a couple of years in the pots to establish their root system before I add them into the yard. So on standby right now, we've got some blueberries. We're building a brand new section of the yard near that high tunnel where the planned high tunnel is going to be. That'll be rows of blueberry, rows of blackberry. And we have an apple tree. This is an Ein Shimmer apple tree. We have a non-native Japanese maple. I'm sorry, but Japanese maples are just so pretty. They're not very beneficial to wildlife, but they are pretty. More blueberries. This is a currant. Currants aren't really great for the south. I'm trying it again. Currants and blueberries are rather special to me. My grandpa Ernie would have currants and blueberries in his yard, and after I'd have to go pick rocks for him, he would let me free to eat whatever I wanted off the bushes, and I would eat the blueberries like crazy and the red currants, and red currants are so delicious. So I'm trying to see if I can baby this plant just like the rhubarb. I'm going to see if I can have some currants. This is a loquat tree that I got from In Bloom's Garden and Gifts in Crystal Springs. And this was a Christmas tree that we got for Christmas decoration that I'm going to see if I can plant in the yard. And as usual, there is always something that I'm testing going on right now. So I am testing grapes. I have tested them in the past. They haven't done well. This one came from Tai Tai Nurseries in Tennessee. I'm hoping that the method that we're growing it might make it work. I'm really confused. I don't understand why muscadines grow amazing, which is really just a really big grape, but regular grapes don't grow well in the south. This is a ladyfinger seedless grape, and how I've done it, I've planted it above ground. So the base of the container is open, but I planted it above ground because I want it to dry out. I feel like it's had some root rot in the past with too much water in the places I've put it. So we're trying it with kind of a half above ground, half in ground, so it can do whatever it really wants. Like I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we're going to give it a try. Lastly, this is my other favorite space. It is right near the house, and it is where I sit down. I enjoy my cup of coffee and just sit and enjoy the birds. I usually get my birds at the hummingbird feeder up here. I have two birds. Oh, you just saw him there nesting in the corner. So this is where I sit here and I just watch bird TV and I enjoy my space. All my citrus trees kind of surround me, some different flowers, and this is my favorite space. Many of you will be wondering about the moringa tree. It is still growing. It is doing just lovely. It's quite tall. It's lost a lot of its leaves in the greenhouse over the winter, but it's coming back just fine. It's doing very well. There's lots of growth on it, and I'm sure it'll be very pretty once it's hit the middle of summer. Put the moringa tree in an area near that bird feeder and also near my seating area, and what I love about it is birds will just come along and sit on it, and it's precious. The pollinator patch doesn't look like much right now, but it's been seeded, so it should look really pretty in a couple of weeks. But we no longer have chickens this year. Last year, unfortunately, a fox took out our chickens. Not the fox's fault. We put tasty chickens in his backyard, but we are going to rebuild with kind of a new chicken coop. We're looking at making kind of a cute little chicken village that will be a lot more secure and better for chickens, and it'll still kind of bother the foxes because they'll know they're there, but at the same time they won't be able to get them. So we'll be doing chickens a bit differently a bit later on. So lots of projects this year, lots of redevelopment, and I think that's one of the things that I love so much about gardening is that even if you do it one way, it can be changed. Like if you're a creative person, gardening is absolutely wonderful for you because you can mix it up, you can change it, you can add your own flair, and each year I seem to evolve it differently, but depending on what I learn, what isn't working, what is working. So it's been really a fun project to keep evolving this garden. All right, guys, that's it. That's the garden space. That's my little piece of joy. I hope you all have a little piece of joy, no matter how big or how small that might be. I just want to say a shout out to my grandpa Ernie. Ernie, I love you. My garden is because of you. And to everybody else, be friendly, be kind.